Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That, of course, is Dan Harris and Kyle Yates, and it's you. And today, it's all about the must-haves. That's right. Everyone's got their guys, and we're going to talk about our guys on the show that we just can't go into the 2021 NFL season without. We're going to go through the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight end. I'm sure 14 of these 15 players will be Trey Lance whenever Kyle Yates gets to them. But before we do, I just want to remind everybody that we've got a brand new giveaway here at Fantasy Pros to be very excited about. We already gave away the Clyde Edwards-Helaire helmet. It's gone. You missed it. But we'll announce that winner in just a day or two. We have a new thing here to give away, and that is a football autographed by Kyler Murray. Could this be the MVP Kyler Murray season? It's possible. And if you want to get a piece of history with an autographed ball by Kyler Murray, thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction, there's only one way to get it, and that's going to fantasypros.com/contest. And don't forget, you get a 3 times entry if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/fantasypros. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, click that little bell for the notifications, then go to fantasypros.com/contest. You drop your review on Apple Podcasts or CastBox. Next thing you know, that Kyler Murray autograph football can be yours. It's a new month. It's a fresh start with lots of fun things to do here. And speaking of fun things, Dan Harris, back on the show. We missed you a couple days. I know you've been working feverishly trying to get everything together. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right. Yes, I apologize for my absence on the podcast. It is generally because I try to make sure that our podcasts are at the highest possible level at this point, and I generally bring it down. So I've made an exception for this one. I'm here. Thank you, Yates, for acknowledging. I'm here, though, ready, because everybody wants to know who my guys are so they can make sure to avoid them. I'm fine. I'm here for you. I'm ready to go for this one. Let's do it.
That's right. And Yates, you and I have talked quite a bit about the players we like, but I feel like this is kind of that last stamp, that flag that we're going to plant as we go into the weekend, and there's going to be a ton of drafts. So we've had a long time to think about this. We've had a long time to evaluate. And our guys are our guys. Like, we're just not going to come up with different names now just because. But there might be one or two that maybe we're going to highlight a little bit more today that maybe we haven't talked about enough. So, Yates, this is that final draft weekend. How excited are you for football?
Man, it's so exciting. I've got an in-person draft this weekend with a bunch of buddies from church, and I just cannot wait for that, right? Like, all my drafts at this point have been online, but there's just something about an in-person draft, having that and getting all together, and especially now after last year, right? All of 2020. So being able to get together in person, football is here. We got college football on the TV tonight. Oh, my word. I cannot wait for week 1.
I've got a huge salary cap guillotine league on Saturday morning drafting. Ooh. That is going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to that. But you're right, Yates. It's that in-person drafts being back. I had back-to-back weekends. It doesn't get better than that. I got to meet a bunch of really cool people, too, at one that I didn't know. Even including our own Mike Mayer, I got to finally hang out with in person. So it's a beautiful thing. Fantasy football bringing us together, which is perfect. And we want to bring together these guys for your team. So pay close attention, boys and girls, because this is where the rubber meets the road. These are our must-haves, our people that we don't want to go into 2021 without. Dan Harris, let's start with you. Give me a running back, in your opinion, that you just can't live without, that is your guy, your must-have.
So we do a bunch of drafts, obviously, salary cap drafts, regular drafts. We're in a bunch of leagues. There's always one player, right? There's one player that you're always like, this guy is kind of ending up on my team everywhere. And for me, that's Austin Eckler. Let's just very briefly talk about why. Just looking at the running backs, okay, I have him 7th in half PPR. Our expert consensus ranking has him 10th. He has an ADP just among running backs consensus of 9.7. Overall, he is 13th in ECR. He is 13th in consensus ADP. I have him 7th. So if I am drafting in the back end of the first round, he is a guy that I am taking. So why am I higher on him than the consensus? In standard, first of all, I will admit that, maybe not. But obviously, if you have half or full, that's where you're kind of going. We got nervous last year with that first game with Tyrod Taylor, right? But then once Justin Herbert came in, it was awesome. 8 targets a game, 6.5 receptions a game, 11.5 carries per game, over 100 yards, total yards on average per game. The offensive line is better now. They drafted Rashawn Slater. They signed Corey Linsley. And as a pure runner, by the way, Eckler is good in his career. 4.7 yards per carry on average. He had a 19% broken tackle rate last year. Everything is really good with him, but what does the offense look like? Anthony Lynn obviously is gone. Who is in as the offensive coordinator? It's Joe Lombardi. That's good. He's been with the Saints a lot in his career. We know how the Saints used, obviously, Alvin Kamara, but what about when Lombardi was the actual offensive coordinator of the Lions, a decade ago or whatever? What did he do? The running backs, they saw more than 10 targets per game. They had more than 7 catches per game. They had more than 60 receiving yards per game. His philosophy is going to mesh very well with Austin Eckler. So if you are in any league that gives you any sort of points for reception, he's a guy that you have to get. If you are past that top 5 in running back, at that point, the door is open if you want to take Austin Eckler. And if you're in the back end of the first round, I think you absolutely have to target him. He can be very clearly for me, a league winner this year.
All right, Yates, who's the running back that you're opening the door for and putting him right onto your roster?
Yeah, it's Joe Mixon. I started off the offseason talking a lot about Joe Mixon, and then it kind of tailed off as we talked about a lot of other guys, but I'm still ending up with Joe Mixon everywhere on my rosters, and it's a little bit different now because his ADP was around RB16, RB17 in like June, July, even into August, but now it's all the way up at RB13. So people are starting to catch back on to the workload here for Joe Mixon. I still think that's a little bit too low. I've got him at RB10 on the year. So Mixon, yes, he has the injury history, quote unquote, hanging over his head, but for a guy who, I've talked about it several times, if he would have been put on IR right when that injury happened last year and would have come back, right, he would have just been able to rest up, come back fully healthy, we would be viewing Mixon in a completely different light. But because Zach Taylor played this, is he going to play, isn't he going to play game last year, we have a different perception of Joe Mixon in our minds. When he is on the field, the workload is going to be insane. I've got him projected with a 13% target share and a 65% carry split in this backfield. Like, you're going to see Samaje Perine factor in here or there. Chris Evans has showed out in the preseason, but he's still a guy who has very little work to his name. Even in college, he needs some time to sit and develop. So this is Joe Mixon's backfield. And if you're getting him at RB13, you don't have to have him as your RB1 on your roster. So if you can get him as an RB2, and he has, guys, Joe Mixon has true RB1 in fantasy football upside because of the workload that he's going to get and his talent. And if Joe Burrow comes back and plays like 90% of the Joe Burrow that we saw last year, even to begin the season, this offense is going to be pretty good, and they're going to be putting points up on the board. So Joe Mixon, where he is going, RB13 in ADP, RB13 in ECR, I've got him at RB10 on the year.
I think that's the best point you make, is you don't have to have him as your RB1. And I feel better not having him as my RB1, especially because I do have a little concern, not just because of last year's injury, but other years where he's had some injury issues. So yeah, as your RB2, man, that is a really good pairing. Now, I want to talk about somebody, and I'm going to stay on brand because that's what I do. Everybody knows Joey P stays on brand. That's right, Dan Harris, get ready. We're going to talk about
if you say Chubb Club, I am leaving this podcast.
Well, you've already said it, so I don't even have to. And Yates, if that's all I've got to do to get rid of Dan, then that's easy. I put a poll up yesterday, by the way, and it said, if we add Chubb Club shirts to the Fantasy Pro shop, would you buy one? Just so you know, 58.4% said yes, and 41.6% said of course. So there you go. Nobody said no. Of course, it wasn't an option on the poll
at all.
Well, it wasn't an option.
I like forced choices, Joe.
Forced choices are good, so everyone's excited. But, everyone's already heard me talk about Chubb quite a bit. And last night, I was actually on a show with Jake Seeley, our good friend from The Athletic. We were in a draft just yesterday for the CBS Draftathon together, and he took Nick Chubb. And he talked about it last night when they asked us about the draft, and he said the same thing I keep saying about Chubb. You can get your first pick wrong. Everything about Nick Chubb is right. If you go back and look at the stats, let's not forget that in 2019, he almost had 1,500 yards, okay? That is an incredible rushing total. Last year, he had 5.6 yards per carry. That was greater. In fact, he finished as RB9 with just 12 games played last year. That's stunning. He still had well over 1,000 yards rushing. And Jake also made a good point, because even after the show, of course, because we're friends, we're texting, talking about Chubb, and he was talking about, there's not a lot of running backs that get 40-plus receptions anyway. Even if he can hover around 30 or something like that over the season, that's great, because he's got the upside for somewhere around 15 touchdowns and somewhere around 1,500 yards. That is tremendous. That is a great value. And when you're trying to just build a team and get it right, especially with a focal point running back where he is the offense, just like Derrick Henry a couple years ago, I don't see why Nick Chubb doesn't get enough love. And as Dan said, we'll be adding that shirt to Fantasy Pros very soon. Go ahead and check out the shop and wait for that one. It's going to be a big seller. Dan Harris, give me another running back that you want to talk about that you must have this year.
I must be exhausted because I don't remember saying any of that.
Oh,
But
yeah, you signed the
regardless-
form before the show. The whole thing.
Fair.
I had you
It's
sign it
fair.
because I knew you were tired and took advantage of tired Dan Harris.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way you need to be right now. Gus Edwards is the second guy who. What's interesting, guys, is that I have so many shares of Gus Edwards from early drafts just because I thought he was a value there. Anyway, everybody wanted the Tony Pollards and those high-end, insurance policies. But Gus Edwards was my favorite type, which I've talked about, which is the high-end insurance policy, as well as the guy who's going to have standalone value. Now, he vaults up for me. ADP is obviously, I can't really judge it. Even recently, guys, I feel like fantasy managers still aren't kind of adapting yet because even the ADP over the last several days doesn't really pull it in. But in our expert consensus rankings, he's 23. I'd actually, after this, be interested to know where you guys have him. I have him 18th. So every time I'm there in, the fourth round, I'm just pulling the trigger on him and I'm fine. Now, I don't have him as high as I had J.K. Dobbins. I had Dobbins 14th overall. And again, that's pretty much because he lacks, in my opinion, the pass catching chops that Dobbins would have, even though it wouldn't be a ton with the Ravens. But J.J. Zacharyson, who was on earlier this week, said something that was, kind of really the point, which is the difference is that J.K. Dobbins had to deal with Gus Edwards as the backup, right? Gus Edwards does not have to deal with the caliber of running back like himself as the backup. So I do think he's going to kind of balance the lack of pass catching stuff, not total, but just the less that he would have versus J.K. Dobbins with a little bit more volume. Now, I don't expect him to be the bell cow back or anything like that, but I think when we think about it, think about the red zone, right? Lamar Jackson takes a lot of the touchdowns, but Ravens running backs last year scored 17 touchdowns. J.K. Dobbins 9, Gus Edwards 6, and Mark Ingram 2. And remember, down the stretch, Dobbins was just a touchdown machine, 7 over the final 6 games. So Edwards is always one of the highest graded running backs by PFF throughout his career, last year in particular. And again, he does, he's not huge in pass catching, but he has caught 18 of his 22 targets in his career. He's not like a dud, he doesn't have stone hands or anything like that. Remember, we've got Rashad Bateman on IR, we've got Miles Boykin on IR, so to begin the season at least, it's going to be something where they're going to need to lean on him. And again, this is just something where I think, especially if you're drafting this weekend, I just don't think everyone has caught on to exactly what this means for Gus Edwards. So I think he's still a value in drafts. I had him everywhere before this. I'm getting him everywhere now. So he rivals Austin Eckler as the player who I have the most shares of.
All right, so he's RB27 for me, Yates. I also got a lot of recent shares of Tyson Williams because he looked very sharp in the preseason. I liked him a lot, so that's another guy I think you want to circle as your later picks. But where do you have Gus Edwards before we talk about your next guy?
Yeah, I've got Gus Edwards at RB20 on the year.
20,
and I think
wow.
that it's,
Okay.
I think it's going to be really interesting, too, because you mentioned, the ADP not necessarily reflecting it. And I think a large portion of that is because the majority of fantasy football platforms are relying on the ADP to then feed what happens, in future drafts, right? So when people are drafting, they're not typically using cheat sheets. They're looking at the next best available players based on ADP. So then when you're getting to that RB20 range, you're not seeing Gus Edwards in the list, right? You have to scroll down a little bit because he's still down there. So you have him at RB18, I have him at RB20, and that means that based on where, how late this happened, his ADP hasn't had the chance to skyrocket. Sure. So that means that you can get him as your RB3 on the year, right? You don't have to draft him there. That's the benefit. So Gus Edwards at RB20 for me is absolutely a guy that I think you want to be able to get, and the best part about it is because of that little quirk there in fantasy football platforms, you don't have to draft him there.
By the way, this allows me to do a very natural but completely real plug here for our draft assistant, because what you can do and what you should do in every draft is you should use the draft assistant, because you can sync it and you can put in your own cheat sheet. You can have, if you want, the 3 of our rankings with you, and that will show you, and you can go based off that. With that, you're not going to miss Gus Edwards in your draft. You're not going to forget about him. You're not going to see him later. You're going to know exactly where we have him. By the way, it also updates whenever we update our rankings. So if you do that, if you choose us, Yates, you guys, I'm sure, I update my rankings every day as I fine tune. Yates, and I said we're going to do a huge sweep sort of today now with all the cuts and stuff like that. If you create a cheat sheet with our rankings, it will automatically update for you as we update our rankings. So that's really a good way. And again, we work here, okay? So of course we want to hype the tools, but Tags just talk about it all the time. Salary cap draft, regular draft. I don't do a single draft anymore without the assistant up ever, because it really is something that makes a huge difference.
And don't forget, boys and girls, go to fantasypros.com/offers and just make a $10 deposit on Underdog, on Yahoo, on DK, any of our partners there, and you can upgrade to that Hall of Fame subscription for just $10 basically. For 6 months, you get the Hall of Fame, and that allows you to get the draft assistant that he's talking about. Look at it. Seamless. We never even talked about this. It's just synchronicity. That's what it's all about.
It's almost as if our tools and our offers are awesome. And sort of they just naturally slip in the conversation because they're awesome.
All right. Let's get away from the ShamWow commercial. Let's talk to Yates about his other running back that's a must-have for you.
There are the guys that once I plant my flag on them, I apparently just go against the rest of consensus, and I am just going to continue to stand firm on my guys. Did that last year with several, and I'm going to do it this year with Darrell Henderson. Darrell Henderson, the Sony Michel trade was a move that was made for them to have a veteran presence, specifically now that they know that Xavier Jones was going to be waived, right? He's no longer on the team. So now you have Darrell Henderson, Sony Michel, and Jake Funk as your running backs on this roster. Raymond Calais also gone. So they needed to make a move, and they brought in a veteran running back who is going to be able to step in and carry the workload if something does happen to Darrell Henderson. And Sony Michel will have standalone value. Like, he's going to be someone that you can plug in. He's going to see enough work where you can plug him in as a flex option on bye weeks and stuff like that. But just like Darrell Henderson was going to with Cam Akers. So Sony Michel is not moving me off of Darrell Henderson and where I had him ranked. I've got him, Darrell Henderson, now after a projection sweep at RB16 on the year. I still love Darrell Henderson. ADP is RB21, ECR is RB21. I am way above consensus here with Darrell Henderson, and the best part about it is, again, that you do not have to draft him there. There are people that are very skeptical about Darrell Henderson, and I'm in the room with 2 of them right now. So you guys are not going to be drafting Darrell Henderson in any leagues that we do. I will be taking him at a little bit of a discount because I do still believe that this is the starting running back in a top 5 scoring offense this year, and he's going to see enough work with his talent to absolutely return value on where he is being drafted. Plus, I think that he has upside over that. So Darrell Henderson, one of my guys this year, absolutely.
Darrell Henderson is very explosive. He's fast. My struggle with Henderson always was watching him run, which is he seemed unaware at times where he was supposed to be going in terms of, the awareness. And that factor, you hope over time is something he can fix. If he fixes that this season, and one would imagine more repetition can possibly do that, then yeah, he absolutely can hit the upside that you're talking about, and I totally understand it. And kind of to Dan's earlier point, we're in some of these drafts, right? Sometimes these guys go a little later because people still are unaware, and if you can get him as an RB3, it's a great investment, just like Edwards.
So go ahead.
So I want to
let's all say so at the same time.
I want to push back on that, Joe, because what you're talking about is running back vision, right? And so Cam Akers had the same concerns. Like, Cam Akers, vision-wise, had a lot of development still left to do. He was valuable for fantasy football because of the offense he was in and the workload he was going to get. So if we had those same concerns with Cam Akers, which is evident on tape, and he started to
I was going to say, he really developed, when you go from that Patriots game on, he really started to look much better in that. Whereas Henderson, I still struggled with that. Like, I still didn't see it. There were times where it still cropped up. And you're not wrong. Akers definitely still had that. You could still put that on him a little bit.
Sure. So, but Cam Akers, for him to be in that scoring offense and to still have those concerns where he still had to develop, we were ranking him as he was top 12 in consensus ADP. But then now we've got Darrell Henderson 11 spots lower, 10 spots lower. So why? That's my question here, is because I do believe that Darrell Henderson is not going to get the type of workload that Cam Akers is. So yes, that knocks him down a little bit, right? But he's still going to have every opportunity to score in this offense. Like, he is going to be the guy who can break away long runs too with his speed and breakaway playability. So that's the other part of this, is there was such a difference here with Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson in ADP now, where I'm just saying this is still a value. Don't get scared off of Darrell Henderson.
Dan, you're so.
Yeah. So, Yates, first of all, where did you say you have him ranked?
RB16.
Okay. So to be clear, I'm not fading Darrell Henderson. I didn't even know where expert consensus was. There, it's at 22 at running back. That's where I have him. So I'm just in line with the consensus. A couple of points. One is, you mentioned the fact that Xavier Jones got injured and they needed depth and stuff like that. I think they traded for Michel before the Jones injury, right?
I remember. I think it was
I'm almost positive they did.
I can't remember which one.
I'm pretty sure
they
did.
traded for Michel before.
They did, right? He got injured, right? So
and Jake Funk made the roster as well.
Correct, and that's something that did factor into me. Now, look, adding depth is fun. We expected them to add depth. We did not really think that it was wise for them to go into the season with just Xavier Jones and Jake Funk really as a backup. So adding Sony Michel is fine, but it is worth noting that they had both those guys healthy. It's before the injury when they added for Michel. part of my worry, there's a couple things. Number one, he does still have this very vague thumb injury, which I guess we're all just assuming is totally fine. He's going to be 100%. But, I think it could indicate that they're a little worried about him, and they're a little worried about his long-term durability, in which case I probably should be worried about that too as a fantasy manager. And second, Sony Michel is, in my opinion, much better than people think. I think he doesn't get the credit quite that he should as either a pass catcher generally, because I know he doesn't factor in, but also as someone who can factor in around the goal line. So for me, Yates, I'm not completely on the other end of the spectrum here. I'm not fading him because of the fact that Sony Michel is there, but it is something where his presence and the fact that they went out and traded for him, given their situation, given Henderson's just sort of, vague injury and everything like that, does scare me off enough that I'm really more of like a low-end RB2 as opposed to you, seems more like a strong RB2.
Yeah, I think I kind of echo Dan's sentiments there, so I'm not going to belabor that point. Let's get to another running back here. Let's get to my other must-have guy, and it's Trey Sermon. That's right, because I'm looking into the future. I'm not just talking about the first few weeks of the season. I'm talking about trying to project. And maybe in the first 6 weeks, you're going to get Raheem Mostert splitting carries with Trey Sermon. And it seems like that's going to be from the start. And if we're already starting there, with the history of Raheem Mostert's injuries, with the history of him bouncing around from team to team and all that stuff, I'm betting on talent. Just the same way you bet on Jonathan Taylor's talent last year, I think this is another kind of situation where you're betting on the last 8 weeks of the season being better than the first 8 weeks of the season. I think if you do that here with Trey Sermon, you will be rewarded. Now, it might help to certainly get some veteran running backs and maybe a little underappreciated to get some guys in there just for the sheer volume for the first few months. But I do believe that Trey Sermon, as the season goes on, could potentially be a league winner. His schedule is so good. We've pointed it out towards the end here when you're looking into the fantasy playoffs. I know it's dangerous to look ahead, but you know what? I'm looking ahead. And I think that Trey Sermon is a guy that is going to get better and be one of those difference maker guys. And if you look in terms of ranking too right now, he's going easily as an RB3, and he's got the upside to finish potentially as a high-end RB2 when all's said and done. So give me Trey Sermon. That's the guy that I want. I took him yesterday as my RB2, and I feel pretty good about that. Now,
can I ask Yates about Sermon versus Mostert? Because we had the draft, Joe, with Azer, and you took Sermon right before Mostert, and then you talked about how much you hate Mostert, and then my next pick was Mostert. So it was good comedy. But I do want to know, Yates, break down the Raheem Mostert and Trey Sermon feelings.
I will go with Trey Sermon over Raheem Mostert. I think Raheem Mostert is probably going to have more fantasy value to begin the season, especially against Detroit, week 1. Raheem Mostert, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, you're going to get some hate. You'll get some hate comments after week 1 about that.
It's happening. Raheem Mostert is absolutely going to go off in week 1. But then the issue then becomes his durability and how does he end the season, right, as far as ranking versus Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon, I think he's got his own injury history and injury concerns, which durability could play a role in that too. There's a conversation. But when you look at the depth chart now, they moved on from Wayne Gallman. Wayne Gallman is not on this roster.
Yep.
And it's Elijah Mitchell, who I don't know if you guys ended up watching the snaps from that third preseason game. Elijah Mitchell needs a lot of work as a running back. That he threw off Trey Lance a couple of times and needs a lot of work there as far as the refined aspects of the position. So we're not going to see him on the field for quite a while. He's not going to play a huge role. Then you got JaMychal Hasty, who we kind of know who JaMychal Hasty is at this point. He's just a kind of a depth piece and can produce if he's given the opportunity. But if Raheem Mostert, when Raheem Mostert goes down with an injury, then we've got Trey Sermon as an absolute league winner this year because you mentioned the schedule, Joe. And for those who haven't, they might be tuning in. This might be one of the episodes that they've listened to here. Week 11 on Jacksonville, Minnesota, Seattle, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston to end the year. Those are fantastic matchups for Trey Sermon if he is playing and is the starting running back at that point of the season to absolutely smash. So as RB31 in ADP right now, RB30 in ECR, yeah, he's a home run pick.
All right, so there you go. There's the Trey Sermon love from Yates, and now I feel even better about planting my flag. Dan Harris, let's talk about a wide receiver you want to give a home on all your fantasy teams too.
It's Deontay Johnson, and I'll say that this is one of these times, and I feel like, Yates, we run into this all the time, and I feel like people get annoyed when I say it, but the margin when you're looking at wide receivers in this range, the difference in projections, it's like razor thin, right? So it's not like a huge, I'm not like, oh God, you got to go get him, but he's 21 in ECR, he's 21.3 in ADP in terms of just at wide receiver, not overall. I am 16th. Okay, so when you get to that range, and I'm looking at the expert consensus rankings, and you're looking at the DJ Moore, Julio Jones, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett. I'm pulling the trigger on Deontay Johnson before all of them because I just want him on my team, and I found myself doing that. So he's basically a top 10 receiver last year. When he was healthy, averaged roughly 7 catches, 75 yards, half a touchdown per game. When he was healthy, sees a ton of games with double-digit targets, 139 targets on the season. That was 5th most among wide receivers, and that includes that he missed a game, and he basically was removed super early in 3 other games. It's clear they did not go into this offseason expecting or planning around the fact that Juju Smith-Schuster was going to be a big part of the offense. Yates, you have mentioned that several times. I think you're correct now. And if Juju does factor in, that's going to hurt Chase Claypool more than Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson doesn't leave the field. We've seen it in the preseason. And I get that they're going to pass less. Okay, that's just what's going to happen. I agree with that. Najee Harris is there. But Ben looks good. He looks good this season.
Does.
I think another year, right? Joe, we talk about it with baseball, right? You have the big elbow reconstruction. That first year is like disgusting. And the second year, you're kind of back to normal. So he looks good. I think the offense as a whole is going to improve. And again, the big thing with him is the drops. I think he had 14 last year. I just don't see that as something that's very repeatable. So for me, I just feel like this is going to be a big Deontay Johnson year. And when I'm at that range and I'm taking the wide receiver in that range, I just moved him to the head of the line. So he's one of my guys.
Drafted him yesterday. Feel real good. Actually, I got him as my wide receiver 3 on that team, if you could believe that.
That's awesome.
Wee, loving that in the full PPR, no less. All right, Yates, give me a wide receiver that you are looking forward to having all the shares of that you must have in 21.
It was part of my bold predictions, and it's Robert Woods finishing the year as a top 5 wide receiver, so I'll back it up here and say Robert Woods is one of these guys that I have everywhere, like in Dynasty, and I've got him everywhere in redraft leagues this year too. Robert Woods, just the definition of consistency, even with Jared Goff as his quarterback. I mean, the past 3 years, finishing with 86 receptions, 90 receptions, 90 receptions, and then 1,219 yards, 1,134 yards, 936 yards. Like, he is just one of the most consistent and underrated wide receivers in the entire NFL. Now you add Matthew Stafford to the fold here in this offense, and we could just see this offense take off. I mean, Robert Woods can finish with those reception totals, maybe even a tick above that. The yardage numbers may go up, and then the touchdown totals could even go up to like 10 this year. So Robert Woods, one of these guys that I loved earlier on in the offseason because he was wide receiver 19, wide receiver 20 in ADP. Not anymore. He's at wide receiver 15, wide receiver 14 in ECR. I've still got him one tick above that. I've got him at wide receiver 13. So Robert Woods as a high-end wide receiver too. I'm even comfortable if I load up on running back in the first 2 rounds and I can grab Robert Woods as my wide receiver 1. I am perfectly comfortable with that this year.
Yeah, I can understand. Actually, in case you missed it yesterday, Derek Brown had a fascinating case for the other side of Cooper Kupp instead of Robert Woods, and it was a great debate. Really smart guys talking football there, slinging the yang, which is great. But I tend to kind of go with Yates' side, which, again, that hurts me just to say those words out loud, but I kind of lean towards Robert Woods as well in this one. I'm going to talk about one of my guys at wide receiver here, and of course, it's Jerry Jeudy. I think he's got top 20 upside when all is said and done. He's one of my guys. I'm not going to live in the past with Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton had a very good year a few years ago at a very good value, and I think people are hung up on that a little bit. Courtland Sutton had some warts in that good year, even though you look at him healthy this year and you're saying, okay, we're going to add him back into this offense. I think what I'm looking for is talent winning out. Jerry Jeudy was a rookie last year. Jerry Jeudy led the league, we talk about this a million times, in terms of uncatchable balls thrown his way. And then he dropped a bunch too. Give him some time. Talent wins out. Second-year wide receivers tend to really make a jump. There's a lot of good ones this year in this class because last year's wide receiver class was outstanding. Not everybody's Justin Jefferson out of the gate. But Jerry Jeudy, I think, is going to remind everybody why he was arguably the best talent in that draft class. And yes, it's Teddy Bridgewater. It's not Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football. However, I think Jerry Jeudy with that talent can do enough this year to really outperform his ADP. And if you take a look at that ADP right now at Jerry Jeudy, it's still in a place that it's very friendly for you. So I would be taking that leap. He is wide receiver 29 in ADP and half-point PPR right now. So I'm good for Jerry Jeudy. I want him on all my teams, and I've drafted him on all my teams because I walk the walk. Dan Harris, who are you walking onto your roster at wide receiver next?
We've been talking about a lot of high-end players here. Let's go a little lower, but still a guy who, if you listened to me last year, you know, a guy that I have an irrational love for, and I don't apologize for it. And that is Emmanuel Sanders. So let's just very briefly talk about where Emmanuel Sanders is and all the ways you can potentially exploit
He's
things.
in Buffalo. That's where he is.
Hold on. I have to redo my evaluation. Okay, so Emmanuel Sanders. I'm 59th at wide receiver. He is 71st in our expert consensus rankings, and he is 65th in consensus ADP in terms, again, this is just wide receiver, 65th, but that is pulled up a lot by Yahoo, where he is somehow going as the 51st wide receiver. Even Dan Harris cannot justify that. But in Fantrax, he's the 73rd receiver in ADP, sleeper 76th. He's outside the top 75 in FFC. And that is, by the way, a good lesson to you. If you do like Emmanuel Sanders like I do, and you're drafting on Yahoo, you probably need to be prepared for the fact that he is going to go earlier than you expect. That's why I love our consensus ADP, where you can see it across sites. But anyway, let's talk about Emmanuel Sanders. Yates, you mentioned with Tom Brady that you are willing to, what was it, ride the wave straight to hell?
Ride the wave straight to hell, yes. That's
all
exactly
right, so,
it. Yep.
Yeah, you might be riding the Tom Brady, like, tsunami wave straight to hell. I'm riding, like, the Emmanuel Sanders baby wave that, like, knocks
Yours
over,
seems like an express, Dan Harris.
Yours is the back end of the wave pool. You know, like the front of the wave pool goes the big waves, and then you get to where, like, the toddlers are hanging out, like, right in the
it's the toddler. I'll ride the top.
Yep.
It smells
Toddler
kind of
wave.
the same, too.
Toddler wave, straight to hell. Look, upside is great when you're drafting a wide receiver late. Obviously, you're not drafting Emmanuel Sanders to start for your fantasy team. But when we go late, everybody wants the home run plays. And I think for a lot of times, that's fine. But again, we're in a year where COVID is probably going to play a factor in people randomly missing games. And sometimes what you need is just a receiver that you know you can put in there and you're going to get decent production out of week in and week out. And I think that is going to be Sanders. Even last year, when it was not a good year for Sanders, he still finished 43rd in half PPR at wide receiver. That's 5. And again, I talk about the stat yards per route run. That's something that I like. You know how I'm saying. I'm pronouncing it right now.
It's very good. You did a very nice job.
I'm working on it very hard. 1.99 yards per route run. That is very, very good, especially for a receiver as aged as he is. It was 21st among receivers who had at least 60 targets. And again, that's a notoriously sticky set. He is old, but he's still relatively explosive. And again, John Brown is gone. He had more than 7 targets per game last year. Sanders can work on the outside. He can also work in the slot. And I think we have to assume that there is a chance that Cole Beasley is going to miss some time this year, necessarily just because of the protocols or whatever. So Sanders basically can go everywhere. He is free in drafts. He's a guy who I'm basically drafting with one of my last picks everywhere. Because again, I am more willing this year to take the late receiver that maybe isn't going to be a league winner, but is going to give me a fill-in given the fact that we are in a year where I think people are going to be randomly scratched more often than not.
Dan, if you're high on Sanders, and again, I'm choosing my words carefully, are you also then low on Gabriel Davis or Cole Beasley? Like, I'm just trying to gauge, because we all know Stephon Diggs is an entity unto himself, but how do you rate the other two? Because I'm a big Gabriel Davis fan, but if you kind of knock them down because you like Sanders so much potentially.
Yes, I am low on both. I'm not drafting Cole Beasley anywhere at all. It's not about his talent. It's just about the fact that we can read the writing on the wall. This is probably going to be a year where there's going to be protocol issues and there's going to be stuff like that. And it's just not where I'm going. Davis is a guy who I have slowly kind of moved down. To be fair, when I started the rankings process and my projections process, I had Sanders as a complete afterthought. But as I've gotten into it, and again, he finally he was obviously dealing with a foot injury. He's always dealing with something. But, he looked fine in this last preseason game. And the other thing, by the way, that I harp on is, this is not like when we hired Yates and like he had to beat down our door and ask to be hired like every day for like a year before we finally relented. Like the Bills went out. I'm terrible. The Bills went out and targeted Emmanuel Sanders, not just this year, but 4 years. They want him on this team. They see him as somebody who can contribute on this team. So when I mixed it all up, in the end, I am fading Davis. Actually, I don't know what his ECR is if somebody wants to look that up. I have him
It's lower
70th.
than it should be, I can tell you that.
That's
okay.
for sure.
All right, so I am 70th for me at wide
CCR is
receiver.
63.
63. Okay, so I am fading Gabriel Davis then in that sense. I do expect there to be 2 wide receivers who you can, obviously Stephon Diggs. This only other one that I think is really worth rostering for me is Emmanuel Sanders.
I have Gabriel Davis all the way up at 51, so big difference there.
Yates, man, what about you?
Touchdowns matter.
I have him a lot higher than that. I just went through and did a projection sweep, and Gabriel Davis. I'm in on Gabriel Davis.
Welcome, my friend.
Hold on.
Come join me. The Gabriel
What's the
Davis
number? What's much higher than what he has?
Higher than 51, huh?
Looking,
I can't count like that. So what is your number?
Gabriel Davis. Where'd he go?
49.
So where did you have him?
51.
So I have him at 46.
All right. I might have to go reevaluate my love now.
I would like you both to know that you're incorrect. So I'll put that out there.
All right, Yates, give me a wide receiver that you're correct about that you're planting the flag on in 21.
This is one that Dan is way off on. Michael Pittman Jr. Ending up with MPJ on every single one of my rosters this year. I mean, there was hype for Michael Pittman Jr. coming into the year, but it was relative, right? He was still going in like the wide receiver 40 range, but there was some optimism. But then with the Carson Wentz foot injury, like his ADP came crashing down. It was in the 50s, and since then we've got Carson Wentz now back at practice. After the COVID-19 close contact. So now he's back at practice. He's going to be playing week 1. And Michael Pittman Jr. has yet to rise dramatically up boards. And now we have the T.Y. Hilton news that he landed on IR, short-term IRs, probably as out a minimum of 3 weeks. Who else is going to be in this offense receiving the ball? Like you got Paris Campbell, who we don't know what his role is on this offense. Zach Pascal, like he's just a guy at this point. You've got Mike Straken. I don't even know how to say his name.
Yeah, but you can say the guy on Denver. That one you can say.
Right. Alberto Cuebanam? Yeah.
There he goes. No, put $1 in the jar.
The ball has to go somewhere in this offense, and it's Michael Pittman Jr. He is the unquestioned wide receiver 1. For where he is going in drafts right now as the wide receiver 46 in ADP, he's wide receiver 47 in ECR. Once you get outside the top 36 receivers in ADP, you are going to be hard-pressed to find a receiver who's going to see more than 100 targets on the year. Michael Pittman Jr., I've got him with 125 targets on the year, guys. So this is a screaming value in drafts right now. I am getting Michael Pittman Jr. as my wide receiver 4 everywhere.
I love it. I mean, why not? I mean, it's all upside
has him at wide receiver 60, so I don't know what he's doing.
This is a lie. This is a bold-faced lie. I hold on. Let's talk about it.
I'm at 56. I don't go crazy because I'm still very concerned.
I'm at 47. Go after Joe.
I didn't know that he had him at 56.
I am at 56. Now you know. I
Okay,
guess here's my thing. It's
ahead.
not an indictment on Michael Pittman so much as I'm just really concerned about this Colts team getting off on the right foot. And again, once again, no pun intended there with the foot, but we have the Carson Wentz thing. He's missing time. He should be in the offense. I think Pittman eventually will win out. I'm just worried about by the time we get to a situation where things are really kind of rolling for this offense, I don't want to start off my season 2-4. And I think a Pittman selection, if you take him too high, and you're right, and you don't have to, and that's why it's still a good investment. There's just other guys that I personally like more. That's all.
Yeah, it's where do you actually have him ranked now, Pittman?
I have Pittman at 36.
Okay. So you're really like, oh, you'll roll with him maybe as a wide receiver 3 if you have to. Yeah, okay. So look, here is my general take on Pittman. Number 1, I like Michael Pittman Jr. very much as a player, okay? And I hope you're right. And I think that is within the range of outcomes, okay? I do think that it is within the range of outcomes that Pittman explodes this year. But I do have hesitation. Number 1, first of all, I do think it is short-term IR, as you mentioned, for T.Y. Hilton. And everything I've read said we expect him back basically as soon as he's eligible. So by week 4. Number 2, I didn't want a piece of this passing game when T.Y. Hilton was healthy. So it's not like, oh, wait, now that T.Y. Hilton's gone for 3 games, give me one of these wide receivers because I don't expect all that much from it. Carson Wentz, Joe, as you mentioned, he's missed a lot of time, obviously, right now. And look, we had Dr. Chow on, a couple of weeks ago or whatever, and I asked him about Wentz, and he says, look, Irsay said that he's not going to play unless he's 100% by week 1. So he's either not playing week 1 or Irsay is just going to basically throw that out the window because there's no chance that he's going to be back to 100% by week 1. So what you have at the beginning of the season, when Pittman has a chance to shine, is a limited Carson Wentz who has had minimal sort of interaction with this offense at this point. There's just enough hesitation for me. Again, I have him 47 Yates, and we were talking right before we came on about what are your projections. Like, I'm doing a sweep of the projections today. It's possible I'll move him up. Good with him as a wide receiver 4. Where you are as a borderline wide receiver, I mean, at 36, it's like, for me, 36 for me is like Devonta Smith, Tyler Boyd, Laviska Shenault. Like, that's a different tier for me.
I've got Pittman 1 spot above Laviska Shenault.
Okay. So that's just it. We see it different. And again, you loved Pittman last year. You have your guys.
Yep.
I'd rather be on Michael Pittman than Emmanuel Sanders. So
all of us who have our guys, we have reasons for our guys, and we back up those reasons, and then it all comes down to the performance on the field. That's the whole point. Yep. I'm going to talk about another one of my wide receivers here, and it's Jalen Waddle, who sometimes I have as a wide receiver 4 in my teams, sometimes even a wide receiver 5. In fact, yesterday in that analyst draft, I got him as my wide receiver 5. Ooh, I can't believe he lasted that long. Highway
Did you draft
robbery.
anything other than wide receivers in that league?
Nope, pretty much. Well, I mean, I'll run it down. Nobody cares about my fantasy team, but that's
do it
fine.
at the end, whatever.
Well, you asked. So Josh Allen's the quarterback. Derrick Henry's the running back. This is from the 5 spot. Trey Sermon is my RB2, so yes, a little bit of concern there. But here's the wide receivers. You ready, boys and girls? DeAndre Hopkins, CeeDee Lamb, Deontay Johnson, Robbie Anderson is the flex, and Jalen Waddle on the bench. How you doing? You like that? Also, Gabriel Davis and Russell Gage as wide receivers on that full PPR team. You like that, Harris?
I do, actually. Well done.
Not bad, right?
Well
done. And like I took some shots on the Connors and Tyson Williams and Kenny Drake Slater. Whatever. Those guys are fine. But I want to talk about Jalen Waddle. Because this is a guy who's going to be earmarked for a ton of volume. Tua looks like he is progressing as we all hoped he would in year 2. Healthier, full OTAs, full practice time, preseason, all that stuff that a young quarterback needs to be successful. And the other thing he needs is a talented wide receiver, and he's got one. In fact, they've got more than one now because they added Will Fuller. But here's the point. The point is Jalen Waddle's yards after catch, I think, are going to be huge this year. His playmaking ability is huge. Had Jalen Waddle played more last year healthy for Alabama, I think we'd be talking a lot more about Jalen Waddle, but instead we were all talking about Devontae Smith, who's a great talent. Heisman Trophy winner, we get it. But now we're in the NFL. Jalen Waddle, I think, could be a difference maker. He is a wide receiver 5 sometimes in drafts. I just showed you one with some of the best fantasy football minds in the planet, right? And I still got him as a wide receiver 5. It's doable. But even as a 4, I love Jalen Waddle, love the upside. Give me all the Waddle. I've got him on all my teams already. So please stay healthy, Jalen. That's all I'm saying to you. All right, let's go to another position here. Dan Harris, give me that must-have tight end for you at this juncture in draft season.
So we went really low with Sanders. We're going to go really high here with tight end, and we'll go with Darren Waller. And obviously, look, I don't have to sell you on Darren Waller being a stud tight end. We've got the big 3 with Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle. But I have Darren Waller 19th in my overall rankings. He's 24th overall in ADP. He's 23rd in ECR. So, Joe, we did the draft with Azer where he had the first pick, and he did what I always say I like to do, which is on that turn after you start with McCaffrey, you hit Waller, you hit a receiver. That's usually how it goes. But I'm now at the point where I'm willing to take him earlier than that because I've just been thinking so much about what our optimal strategy should be when it comes to the tight end position. So very briefly, a couple stats about Darren Waller, why he's great. He obviously tied Travis Kelce for the most targets by tight end with 145 last year, led the position in receptions with 107, led the position with 27 red zone targets, 21 red zone receptions. Mentioned route run, 2.28 yards per route run. That is absolutely elite. And again, we like Bryan Edwards, like, as a sleeper, for sure. Like, maybe Henry Ruggs is going to do something.
Oh, John Brown's not there anymore.
Brown, well, this offense has to run through Waller. Like, it just does. It did last year. I was trying to basically, like, how do I even say this?
It just has to.
Because whatever we think about the Raiders coaching staff, like, it has to. And he's incredible. He battled the injury, obviously, this preseason. The first time I saw him in practice, I was like, oh my God, like, he's just a complete monster. So for me, I really think that with Waller, Kittle to a little bit lesser extent, I have a tiny bit of a gap now between them, but for the most part, this is something where I'm no longer like, all right, cool, if it's just at the turn. Like, this is something where if I'm looking at that group of the DK Metcalf, the Justin Jefferson, the A.J. Brown, I think I'm going with Waller before those guys even. So this is something where I'm going to wind up with him on a lot of my teams because I have him ranked before most people do. And it's just going to be a monster. And again, we've talked about it, and Jamie Eisberg said it great or late for sure, but I am going great more often than not.
All right. Tight end, Kyle Yates, your must-have. You've got more than one candidate here because I know I've done enough shows with you. There might be a name or two. But who's the guy you landed on that's your must-have tight end?
For those who listen, who take a shot every time that I say Jonnu Smith, drink up. No, I will go, obviously, Jonnu Smith. But then
can you imagine somebody, by the way, who's watching this for the first time and has no idea that, like, you are the Jonnu Smith and
that's Trey Lance person? That's impossible at this point. Tyler Higbee is the other guy that I will talk about. I've got Jonnu Smith at tight end 6 on the year. I've got Tyler Higbee right behind him at tight end 7. So Higbee in this offense, I talked about it a lot with Robert Woods, that this offense is just going to be insane this year. And you look at the receiving options that the Rams have here, and you've got Cooper Kupp, who is a big slot receiver, but then the rest of this offense is kind of a little bit undersized, right? As far as a guy who can be a red zone presence, which either if you are chasing volume at the tight end position, that's what we want, right? Volume, which is why we've got George Kittle, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce up in that top tier. If you're not able to find that, which it kind of drops off a cliff after that, after those top three, then you're chasing touchdown upside. And so Tyler Higbee absolutely has it, where I think he's going to be an integral part of this offense. He's not going to push the target totals that the top three guys will, but he can easily finish with as many receiving touchdowns as those top tier guys. So Tyler Higbee, tight end 7 on the year, outside of Jonnu Smith, he is the guy that I'm ending up with on every single one of my rosters that I can.
Yeah, it's funny, Dan. I had this terrible image that you made appear in my head of, Kyle Yates in a thunderstorm in his basement writing a letter to Jonnu Smith, like that Eminem video where he's like, "Hey, what's up, Jonnu? It's me, Kyle. I've been following your career for a very long while. I wondered."
I really hope Jonnu Smith at some point learns about this. I'm sure he doesn't care.
Yeah, we got to get him on the. You really should get him on the show.
Fact that basically, and by the way, I mean, I am like the non-Jonnu Smith guy of the
and I'm
three
a
of
pro
us.
Jonnu guy, so I'm right there with
and I still love Jonnu Smith. I just don't have him. Yates has him tight end 6. Higbee, by the way, fantastic call. He's 11th in ECR and ADP at the tight end position. You can get him every single time. Logan Thomas is my guy, as you guys know,
Logan
at
Thomas
7.
too.
But Logan Thomas is going there. He's going 7th, and he's ranked 7th. But Higbee, there is that delta between, in my opinion, it sounds like all our opinion, where he should be going and where he actually is going. And this plays out in real drafts. We've done drafts, we've done mocks. This is where he goes. He is like that last tight end. So happy to grab him in pretty much every league. Co-sign everything Yates said.
Dan, can we have Yates do a video for the YouTube channel of him writing that letter? I mean, I'll help write some bars for him. We'll get him all set up to Jonnu Smith.
I'll consider it.
Right.
I'll consider it.
I think that would get some huge numbers. I'm just saying, he's very good on the TikTok. Yates is very good on the TikTok. He really is. True. I think this is like that Yates, if you want to make this a TikTok, by all means do it. The letter to Jonnu Smith, I think you should do it.
Don't do
I
it,
think you should. All right. So, the great or late tight end, we've been talking a lot about that this whole season. And as draft season has gone on and a couple tight end situations have got muddier, we have the Eagles situation now where Zach Ertz, everybody was, reminded that he's still alive and playing football. And he looks like he's going to be playing for the Eagles, at least right now, as of today, us recording this on 9/2. And you have the Irv Smith injury, another tight end that's kind of gone. And everybody knows I love me some Jonnu Smith, but I'm starting to do something new. And I'm starting to buy into the Kyle Pitts, somebody that I hadn't really bought into a lot. But recently, I'm starting to make that reach. In fact, on Saturday, I think in that salary cap league, I'm going to make a pretty strong bid for him. And here's why. I keep coming back to Darren Waller's rookie season, right, where he first took over as a tight end after being a converted wide receiver. So I think that's a very similar path that you can look and say, well, what is the real upside for Kyle Pitts? And if you go back, 90 receptions on 117 targets for 1145 and just 3 touchdowns. Now, despite having just 3 touchdowns, he finished as tight end 4 that year. Last year, Darren Waller was tight end 2. So I'm going to go back to that tight end 4 2019 season. And I'm looking at Kyle Pitts and how he's going to be used in this offense. And I'm looking at the touchdown equity that I think he brings because he's such a matchup disaster in the red zone, right? Because of that catch radius that he has and the way he's going to be used, especially with Julio now vacating targets. And I know right now our projections on FantasyPros have him somewhere around 800 yards receiving. I think that might be low. I think Kyle Pitts might be that guy to buck that trend because I think he is a hybrid. I think he's something new. He doesn't fit that mold of what a tight end is. And it's not because of the one play. I don't go crazy about the preseason splash play kind of stuff, okay? This is going back to the college tape. This is also going back to the data about the Falcons. And let's not forget how bad the Falcons defense is going to be yet again this year. This is a secondary that hasn't tackled since 2014. And I'm telling you right now, this is not going to change. They're going to still have to throw the ball quite a bit. And I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a huge part of that, not just Calvin Ridley. So if you are unable to get George Kittle, if you're unable to get Darren Waller, and if you didn't want to spend a first-round pick on Travis Kelce, when you get to that 4th, 5th, maybe even 6th round in a 10-team league and Kyle Pitts is there, I think I'm going to start taking the plunge. I think he's one of my must guys this year. So, Dan, I don't think I've talked to you quite a bit about Kyle Pitts. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a very difficult time with Kyle Pitts for the simple reason that I generally fade rookies, and it was to my chagrin last year.
Yeah, right. How's that going for you, bro?
Not my finest.
Was that Justin Jefferson jersey I sent you? Did it make it there, bro?
I
From
own
Pristine
it.
Auction,
I absolutely own that was a mistake. What's funny is that last year I had like the actual reason to, right? We got no preseason games. Like, it's going to take them a while.
Totally
you did
have
wrong.
Good reason to.
I am wrong about many things.
But I had that same concern you did, which is timing, and you're not having that timing and that lockup time. That could be a real struggle. but
Right.
somehow it bucked the trend anyway, because that's how good this talent is that's getting to the NFL right now.
And so generally, like a little bit of a fade rookies type of guy, not always, but generally, and certainly with the tight end position, when you look back historically, it's almost impossible for a tight end to succeed in his rookie season. But you don't get a Kyle Pitts. He just doesn't come along, every year or every 5 years or every 10 years. And so I'm really running into that. Right now, I believe I have him as tight end 5. Generally speaking, I pull the trigger on him in the 6th round. That's not usually going to get him, okay? At this point, understood. I am debating, Joe. I'm having trouble with it because my projections have him like right in the mix with, Hawkinson and Andrews, but I am debating whether or not I can push him up in this last round of what I'm doing. So the bottom line is this. I probably will have no shares of Kyle Pitts. I feel like I'm probably going to regret it, but realistically, unless I do the Yates where I'm going to the 100 percentile of my potential outcomes,
Right.
I just can't justify doing it where he's going to wind up going in drafts.
I can understand that. In a 10-team league, he's going to make it to the 6th round. I can almost guarantee you. And a lot of people do play in those 10-team leagues. Or if you don't want to wait for him in a 10-team league, you can take him in the 4th, because the wide receiver supply and demand is going to be out there in a 10-team league where you can make it up with the Waddles and the Judys and the Robbie Andersons. The guys are going to probably slip past some people. Yates, what are your thoughts on Pitts?
It's the difference here. I've got Kyle Pitts at tight end 5 in my rankings, but it's the difference in where he's going in conjunction with the other, in comparison to the other tight ends versus the overall ADP. Where you have to spend a 4th or 5th round pick to get Kyle Pitts on your roster, I can't do that, because at that point I'm taking him over some very, very talented wide receivers who have a higher percentage range of like hitting. Right, they have a better chance of hitting than Kyle Pitts, who is a rookie tight end. For as talented as he is, he's still a rookie tight end. So I think if he falls to the 6th round, then that's the point where I'm willing to take him. But that's not happening. People are going to reach in your mom and pop leagues for Kyle Pitts because he's so dynamic, and he's the highest hyped tight end, highest drafted tight end in NFL history.
I'm sorry, not wide receiver. He overall 47 right now in ADP. Tight end 4, overall 47. These are the names going around him, right?
I can't do that.
All right, that's fine. I know you're going to take Darrell Henderson over him. That's fine. Myles Gaskin, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, Kareem Hunt, Mike Davis. I don't think any of those guys necessarily are going to win you a league. I think Kyle Pitts can. And that's the point I'm going to make here about Kyle Pitts. Now, Deontay Johnson's going after him. I would rather have Deontay Johnson, especially in the full PPR. That's not even a question. But I'm looking at trying to win a league. And the one thing that we can always make up ground with, we keep talking about how much we love the wide receivers late, the Moonies, the Jacoby Myers. I mean, we go on and on. Gabriel Davis. There's so many names that we love that can make up ground at wide receiver. I'm starting to buy in because I think that Darren Waller rookie season is within his grasp. Even if he doesn't reach 1,000 yards, I don't see any way that he doesn't have double the amount of touchdowns. I'm sorry. Matt Ryan is just a much better quarterback than what Derek Carr was a couple years ago. So I'm going to automatically just think that 6 touchdowns and 900 yards are well within his grasp. And I think there's upside for more. And if we're talking about winning leagues, I think it's worth the risk.
I can't advocate for fading Kyle Pitts. Like, even if you take him in the
and this is great because we haven't talked about him much.
No, and it's funny because I'm almost glad we haven't talked about him, because it's very difficult for me to crystallize exactly how to express how I feel about him, which is like, I'm not going to be the one to take him, but you probably should be the one to take him.
Well, I took him in our 14-team league that we had in-house this past week too. And you know what? It's because when you start getting into a 14-team league at tight end, it is ugly out there.
I tell you, really, I think a big part of why I rarely go after him, generally speaking, is, number one, again, it forces me to go out of my comfort zone, which is very much like I like to go with like the most likely outcome, as opposed to like, man, this could really go crazy. But also what Yates mentioned, which is you can get Tyler Higbee so late, and I'm so excited about Tyler Higbee at this point. As I've gone through this process, I've become more and more enamored with what he. What'd you say?
Do you think Tyler Higbee wins you a league?
No, I don't think Tyler Higbee wins me a league, but I do think that if I do not spend a 4th round pick on Kyle Pitts, I can win the league in other ways. I'm also very much, by the way, I will say this, in the way I build my teams, I forgot, at one point I have my Twitter profile, I'm very boring and risk averse. That's generally what I am. But I do think even in the way I draft, like, I am more than happy to win leagues, as I have done many times, being boring and risk averse. Just stacking my team with quality players. And I get that you get the Tom Brady, Randy Moss combo year where it's like, well, if you have those guys, you've won your league, or you get the, Patrick Mahomes year or the Lamar Jackson year where it's just like, all right, this is over. But yes, bottom line is this. I'm probably not ending up with Kyle Pitts. The high end of my range of projections is, wow, holy cow, what are we looking at right here? But I'm probably going to play it straight. I have no problem if somebody wants to take that leap and take him in the 4th or 5th. I'm not moving till at least the 6th.
Really quick, with Kyle Pitts, I've got him projected for over 900 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Okay, that's where my projections landed for Kyle Pitts. That puts him with 162 fantasy points on the year. Okay, and he's essentially tied with Mark Andrews. So if you want to put him at tight end 4, then I have no issue with it. But then you flip over to the wide receiver projections, and in my system, I've got Jalen Waddle at wide receiver 36 from a projection standpoint with 165 fantasy points on the year. So you are taking Kyle Pitts, like, can he be a league winner because he puts you at, like, he gets a top 4 finish at the tight end position? Sure. But he's got to put like 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns to be classified as a true league winner, because you can get even though you might not like Tyler Lockett as much, like you're not going to take him there. I still got Tyler Lockett with a lot more fantasy points projected at that range. So it's all about where he's going in overall ADP versus where he's going in the
It's
tight end
also
range.
what the player pool looks like. And you literally just made my argument, because I can get Jalen Waddle the next round or 2. And Jalen Waddle is exactly the kind of guy that I'm looking for, who can make a jump, who is being undervalued at wide receiver. What I'm saying is you can make Kyle Pitts work.
That makes Jalen Waddle the league winner, not Kyle Pitts.
No, because when you're talking about the relative position value of tight end, potentially, what happens is if Mark Andrews underwhelms, if Tyler Higbee doesn't hit, if Jonnu Smith deals with injuries again, the production from tight end, typically speaking, on a weekly basis is bad. It's just bad. And there's that one team that's got Travis Kelce, and the one team that hopefully has Kittle healthy, and then the team that's got Waller, and then nobody else. So if you're trotting out there Kyle Pitts, and he can be that guy on a weekly basis, you have just raised your potential for points on a weekly basis from that one roster spot. And then you have guys that you can either play matchups with at wide receiver, or you have hit on a guy like Jalen Waddle, something like that. But it's the Kyle Pitts selection that really moves the needle more, because there's more options at wide receiver as opposed to tight end.
So in this what-if scenario, you're saying, what if Jonnu Smith struggles with injury again? What if Tyler Higbee doesn't hit? What if Kyle Pitts doesn't hit? What if Kyle Pitts can't buck the trend of a long
I didn't say
line
it was
of history,
safe. I didn't say it was. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But it's something that I am coming to peace with. And once again, I wouldn't say it if I don't do it. And I did it yesterday in a 14-team league. I think it's calculated risk with Kyle Pitts, where you see the value on the board and you're looking around and you're saying, if I take this pick here in this 14-team league, for instance, Kyle Pitts is a difference maker in a 14-team league. And I think there's certain spots where you can look for him and you could take that risk, especially if you like how the first 3 or even 4 rounds have gone for you and you feel great. Then you've already got a really strong base of points. Dan Harris, I know you were itching to get in on this argument.
I loved it. I didn't want to get in. I just don't want to end the show before I say I'm gonna quantify it this way. Okay, I don't. Yates, you and I have talked about it. Like, I don't blindly rely on whatever my projections spit out in terms of rankings. Like, I move guys around based on how I feel. But I will say this: I want to give my projections for Pitts, and I want to give my projections for Tyler Higbee. Kyle Pitts, Kyle Higbee. Can I combine
I want
both
all
of
the
them, by
shares.
the way?
What round is he going?
Yes. Okay. If there was a Kyle Higbee, he'd be going first round. Okay. I have Pitts with 74 receptions, 846 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns.
It's too low.
100. That's fine. That's 151.6 half PPR points. I have Tyler Higbee for 59 receptions, 655 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's 131 points. That is roughly 20 fantasy points over the course of a full season, or 1 fantasy point per game. Now, can Kyle Pitts do way more than I projected for him? Of course. Can Tyler Higbee do less than I projected for him? Of course. But that is generally how I feel about those guys. That's what I think is the most likely outcome. And because of that, because the difference is 1 fantasy point per game, not insignificant, by the way, when we're talking about the tight end position, but still 1 fantasy point per game, that is why I can't pull the trigger earlier than I think is necessary for Pitts, despite the upside, given the fact that I can get Tyler Higbee several rounds later as kind of an afterthought in drafts.
We can't end in a better place than this. This was a fantastically fun conversation with lots of good points of view. Steel sharpens steel. That's what this show is all about here. I love it. A lot of good, respectful arguing, and that's what you want to have. And now we have armed you to go make these decisions. So hopefully you can get as many of these guys on your teams. Oh, and spoiler alert, if there was a quarterback we talked about, Yates was going to say Trey Lance. That's his guy. Don't ruin it for anybody who hasn't listened to other shows yet. But seriously, great stuff as always, guys. I want to remind everybody to do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. And when you do, you get that 3 times entry for our contest at fantasypros.com/contest. This month in September, it's the autographed Kyler Murray ball that we're giving away thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction. PristineAuction.com. That's PRISTINE auction.com. When you sign up there, you get a $5 credit on us with the code FantasyPros. And if you're starting new leagues or moving leagues over to Fantrax, that's the home of all the customizations you could possibly imagine, the best fit for all of your leagues. And if you sign up with Fantrax.com/fantasypros, you will get an opportunity to maybe go with all your league mates to an NFL game this year with $6K in your pocket. That's Fantrax.com/fantasypros. Those are our must-haves, and of course, we can't have a show without you. So you are our must-have at the end of the day. Thank you all for listening and watching so much this month. You've really just crushed it. You've made us feel so good about the content we keep putting out there. You're what drives us. I want to thank all of our listeners and watchers. It's been an up and down, rough month for us, but the fact that you have been with us so consistently means the world to us. We got a great mock draft episode coming at you tomorrow, so that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Yates and Dan Harris, I'm Joey P. We will see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.